Hello, Billy Reeves here. Welcome to the Kscope podcast. Lovely to have your company in this edition. Colin Edwin, a long conversation which will be of interest to Porcupine Tree fans. The O.R.k album is out now, and we'll be hearing tracks from that as well as chatting to Cole. We'll hear from GAZPACHO, JOHNATHAN HULTÉN, and these fellas, Kscope's new signing, EMPYRE, EMPYRE. The album coming out next year is called Relentless, and this is the title track.
Watch them torn apart, sinking too far, falling down and bleeding out, crawling while I run, and now they're screaming out. Oh, watch them torn apart, sinking too far, falling down and bleeding out, crawling while I run, and now they're screaming out. You don't wanna know how senseless I've become. I've no feeling, I'm just numb. I won't be denied, now I'll overthrow. You'll be left behind, I'll stand alone. I'll watch them torn apart, sinking too far, falling down and bleeding out, crawling while I run, and now they're screaming out. Smothered by the arms of failure, suffocated by what made you, every waking moment torn apart, sinking too far, falling down and bleeding out, crawling while I run, and now they're screaming out. Smothered by the arms of failure, suffocated by what made you, every waking moment wasted. You are nothing more than reckless and undone. Where's your future when I'm gone? And I won't compromise, I will take control. You've been left behind, I'll stand alone. I'll watch them torn apart, sinking too far, falling down and bleeding out, crawling while I run, and now they're screaming out. Smothered by the arms of failure, suffocated by what made you, every waking moment torn apart, sinking too far, falling down and bleeding out, crawling while I run, and now they're screaming out. Smothered by the arms of failure, suffocated by what made you, every waking moment wasted.
EMPYRE, EMPYRE. The album's called Relentless, the new signing to Kscope, and that will be out at the end of March. That's the title track. My understanding is the rest of the album's not as heavy rock as that, but the band wanted a real cracker to open with. Mixed by Chris Clancy, the knob twiddler for Machine Head, Those Damn Crows, amongst others. O.R.k, Screamnasium is out now on Kscope, the new album from the Porcupine Tree bassist Colin Edwin, award-winning composer and vocalist Tracklist left King Crimson's Pat Mastelotto and Marta Suitubi's Carmelo Pipitone on guitar. Before we have a long old chat with our dear friend Colin Edwin, let's hear a track. This is called Don't Call Me a Joke. O.R.k. from the album Screamnasium. Don't Call Me a Joke, or is it Don't Call Me a Joke? I should have asked Colin where the inflection was then. Anyway, what I did ask him was, what with all these big choruses and riffs and hooks, you've made a pop record here, haven't you, Colin?
I prefer to use the word accessible.
Okay.
Because I've been accused of being associated with elitist things, or things that are sometimes a bit...
intellectual, because
there's
nothing wrong with an intellectual elite. I don't think. I think artists should be. In Ireland, in Paris, a musician would sit with the priest and the doctor. It's only in England that we're treated like scum.
Well, yeah, but I think if you have an association, if you've done anything sort of jazzy or a little bit intellectual, or there's this idea that you're a bit elitist and blah blah blah. But I don't feel like I like the Sleaford mods as much as I like.
It's an English attitude.
Other things.
It's an English attitude, Colin.
So I like that something's accessible. Hopefully it's got a bit of depth to it as well. It's not just pop in the sort of the dumbest, crassest, lowest common denominator sense.
But even that's great. Even that too.
I think it's just come out the way it's come out. I mean, we didn't really want to do sort of long form stuff, and we had this idea to keep things short and succinct, and no fluff, and I think the record's come out. I hate to use the term all killer, no filler.
Agreed.
But that is sort of how I feel about it. I don't feel there's a weak track on it.
Yeah.
And I feel really good about it. We took our time with it, and of course we had to take our time with it because of everything that's going on. But it's been a great feeling to make the record, because I feel that my bandmates are firing on all four. Yeah. So everyone's sort of at the top of their creative peak, if you like. But not just us, the people around us in terms of like the artwork. Yeah. And the design we've had, and the input we've had from the video designer. Fantastic ideas knocking around, and that's always a good sign.
group of rules, a small canvas, sometimes you have to be more creative.
No, it's definitely the way things just fall about naturally.
Okay.
Though there was not a lot of discussion in terms of the music, really. There's a lot of discussion in terms of things like the mix, and things like that. But when it goes to the music, we tend to be more or less immediate.
So the last time we saw each other was before anybody had heard of COVID-19. How's COVID-19 been for you, a musician?
Well, it's no surprise to say it's been a complete nightmare, really.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can't plan anything. We couldn't do anything for a long time. You know, it derailed all of our plans. So we had some really serious tours lined up.
Yeah.
And some great support. We were lined up to support System of a Down.
Oh, Christ, yeah.
So that would have been a big leap for us in terms of audience and stuff. But all that kind of got shelved. And then, of course, we started the record. We started recording. We stopped for a while. You know,
You weren't happy to do things virtually.
well, we
You
did
wanted to be
eventually,
together.
but I think we just didn't really know. It's like a sort of sudden. It was all very sudden. So it's like suddenly the floor falls out of your plans. You know, I mean, it wasn't just us; it was everybody as well. Of course, you know. So, yeah, I found it really, really difficult. You know, and uninspiring.
Oh, right, okay.
I think, you know, to be honest, having the time at home, you sort of think, oh, well, I'll you know, I can record all day long and I can do this, and then you don't really do it because you don't feel. In a sense, the hardest thing for me was having nothing to look forward to.
Oh, shit, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like no gig, no sort of trip away, nothing. You know, you can't do. You know, even sort of, you know, one of my biggest inspirations is to travel and go somewhere. And you couldn't really do that. You know, you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go outside your zone, could you? The supermarket.
Yeah.
But eventually we did the virtual recording thing, which I'm used to. You know, we're
Of course,
used to.
yeah.
Everyone's
I mean,
used to it
there's
now.
people who are literally all over the world in this group.
Well, exactly. yeah. So that's nothing new. And actually, there's one song. I know we don't really want to talk about COVID-19. We don't want to talk about it because we want to move on from it.
Yeah.
But there's one moment on the record that really. There's a song called "Hope for the Ordinary,"
Yeah.
which for me was all about that. You know, I'd always felt ordinary was overrated.
Yeah.
And now I think it's not overrated at all.
There's that
Ordinary,
great
you know.
line in there, I want to stay alive.
Yeah, well, you know,
Back to basics.
it was all that really.
Humanity,
It all came from that, and also the you know, when you hear the sound of the ordinary, that line, it was because there was complete silence.
Yeah.
And then I went out one day and I heard Traffic for the first time, which I hadn't heard for months.
For what? Yeah.
And then I think I drove my daughter somewhere, and there was people playing football in the park, and it was nothing. But I suddenly thought, wow, this is like, you know, this wasn't happening. You know, it was quite sort of moving, you know, in a way.
Yeah, totally. No.
So,
Totally.
I mean, my kids actually got told off for playing football from the same household. They were in the park, just a couple of them having a kickabout. Police came along.
Wow, obviously
Stuff
the
like that,
same
you know.
police that were going in and out of number 10.
Probably, yeah.
I don't know, whether some of it was positive. I totally agree with you in that there was a lot of lockdown albums. There was a lot of people who were inspired by lockdown, who sort of retreated back into themselves. And tell us, for those that don't know, because O.R.k is I think moving forward into a bigger stratosphere. But for those that don't know, tell us about the other fellas.
Okay, so
term.
yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
Carmelo's somebody with a bit of history from Italy. Fantastically, I think he's an innovator in his own way. You know, he's a one-off. He's definitely a one-off on personality. If you meet him, you won't forget him. He's kind of like I was kind of comparing him, and these are big names like John McGeoch or Johnny Marr. He's got this anti-hero guitar thing because he's in Italy. He's much better known.
Yeah.
He's played in a band called Marta Suitubi, who were kind of one of the bigger independent bands, you know, with a bit of credibility, a lot of credibility because they were independent. They were big, you know. People know him for having this kind of unusual style. So he's kind of a guitar hero, but he's not like a Slash.
Yeah.
You know, he's got his own thing going on, and he does this blend of sometimes really beautiful folky acoustic things. But, you know, he's a rocker as well, definitely, you know. So he's guitars. Then on drums we have Pat Mastelotto. Now, Pat is probably at the moment best known for King Crimson. But he's got a massive history as a drummer. So he played with David Sylvian, and he played with, and probably loads of things you wouldn't even associate with him. He's on the Friends theme, for example. He did the Rembrandts. Yeah.
I should have known. That's a great stat, though.
I mean,
Quiz question.
one story about Pat that illustrates him quite well. We were coming into the UK to do a gig, so I'm the only Brit in the van. There's everyone else's, Italian passport. We had a guy from Slovakia or something, and then there's Pat with his American passport. And the border guards, the UK border guards are going, so, why have you got so many stamps in your passport, Mr. Mastelotto? And he says, well, I'm a drummer. And the guy says, well, who do you play with then? And he reeled off this massive long list of names, and half of it I didn't associate with him. Pointer Sisters was one of them. So Pat, I mean, he's hugely experienced. He's an elder statesman of the drums. But in saying he's an elder statesman, I don't mean to imply he's old school in any way. He's very, very forward thinking. He's a real sonic innovator. He does remixing. He's unique. I can't quite put my finger on what he does, and I don't really want to, because it's part of the magic. Is that
fair.
He will come up with things, inventive things that we hadn't considered, we hadn't thought of.
And Lef?
Well, Lef I've known for quite some time now. So Lef and I first met as part of a band called O.R.k, which didn't do a lot, but we did a few. I'm on the second and third albums, right. And that was very heavy down tune,
like a
riffing
doom
stuff.
Thing almost.
Pretty much. And at the time when I first met him, Lef was singing in sort of his own language. So I mean, O.R.k is kind of hard to describe, but it's doom metal, but with kind of impressionistic vocal sounds. Yeah. But it was accessible.
Because you're not, when you say own language, you're not talking Italian, you're talking a sort of Elizabeth Fraser kind of making sounds with his mouth.
That was what he was doing, but I didn't realise that at the time, because the music was so heavy that the lyrics are sort of just part of it, But it was he's coming up with these, you hear the odd phrase, and you know, like with a lot of heavy stuff, you hear the words, you don't really know what they're singing about,
Satan.
Well, and then I saw his
food stuff.
He's a great one for notes, you see.
Yeah.
So I saw his notes for the lyrics, and it was just like stuff that made no sense whatsoever.
Wow.
But he's actually written.
He'd actually written notes.
Well, it was to do with the phrasing.
Oh right, okay.
But I thought that was quite interesting. And later on, when we did the second record I did with them, he wanted to sing in English.
Okay.
So we started writing lyrics together, and he was singing in English. But prior to all this, I knew him through a friend of mine, Araldo Bonocchi, who's a sort of guitarist, sound designer character who I've made a few records with as well. And Lef has a really deep kind of classical background.
Oh right, okay.
So he comes from he's got a fantastically expanded sense of orchestration, because he's studied all that, and he's done soundtracks and stuff as well.
Okay.
So he wasn't just a shouter, and he's a classically trained singer. So he I don't know if you appreciate me saying this, but he's sung Puccini, and I've heard him
Mrs. Butterfly.
So wow. he's very, very capable. And when I sort of say to people, well, we've got this operatically trained singer in the band, they sort of think of some really tasteless kind of
showing off, which
it shows. Well, it sort of comes out. The impression you might get with that description is something very tasteless and sort of cheesy and pompous. But it's not like that at all.
I want to talk about the Someone Waits as well. Cello,
that's Joe Quayle.
Oh, right. Okay.
And Lef had sketched out this, sort of being classically minded, had sketched out this kind of arrangement with cello and blah blah blah. And he said, well, why don't we ask Joe Quayle, because there's a connection between me and Araldo Bonocchi and Joe Quayle. She made a record with the guy from Einstürzende Neubauten a few years ago.
Collapsing New Buildings.
That's right. So she made a record with him, FM Einheit and Araldo, and so we know Araldo, so he put us in touch with Joe Quayle. So anyway, she just did
because it's a difficult thing to do sonically, isn't it? Because it can be just really boring, can't it? Just sort of someone scraping away in a kind of like lower register. But on that one, there it is.
Yeah, it's soaring. I think is the way.
Goodbye, my friend. You know the night's a star of a frown, and where you saw the fall. Free of occasion, over whitewashing feathers stuck inside a show. Bright sense of thunder without a cause. One more to grieve, one more to wonder.
We've never been to America.
Oh, right,
We've never
okay.
been to USA, so that's something
All right.
would be great to do. Obviously, Italy's a strong place for us.
Yeah.
That's been really good because of, and initially I think it was because of Carmelo. To be honest, people were curious. But yeah, Europe's been, there's some good spots in Europe where we play.
Well, they're still very keen on rock music in Europe, and also I think there's a certain influence of that, sort of away from the kind of like blues tradition, and that's what I love about all the kind of 212 tentacles of heavy rock, is that it's always moving forward, like hip hop is, and there is a kind of like non-American, non-blues influence to it, and I think that comes through in your music.
I think what interests me, and what I've only just realised, is that we've got a really, really good mix by a chap called Machine, who I didn't really know, but he came to us through Pat, because he'd mixed King Crimson record quite a while ago actually, and subsequently he's done Clutch, who are massive in America. I think he'd even done somebody like Fallout Boy or some big commercial thing, and he'd done Lamb of God, which I knew of course, and their records sound great. So but he's given us a very American sound, in a sense. It sounds very clean and very American and very big, which is great. I love that sound. But we're also, I think, a European band. It's a European sounding band.
I think so, yeah.
Despite having an American drummer, it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound English. It doesn't sound American. It doesn't sound bluesy.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound.
But by the same token, you hear all those influences. Especially with the lyrics. A lot of the lyrics are very traditional English, because let's face it, the English, I mean, I know you're Australian, but the English essentially invented pop music. The Americans invented blues and jazz, and that was funneled through art school, and it was the British that invented pop music, and I think that's in it. I feel wrong.
Okay, possibly. I suppose it would be there's sentiments in there that probably wouldn't be expressed by Americans. Or Europeans.
Totally.
Perhaps, possibly. I hadn't really thought of it like that.
Yeah, totally.
I've got this theory that a lot of English art, culture, music and comedy and things like that are all based around anxiety.
And entrapment. I think you're totally right.
So
and willies and bums.
Yeah, of course.
Because we never grow up, do we?
Well, I guess that's come out, not the willies and bums, but the
I think
the anxiety and the sort of
definitely
there's the sort of, that's probably in there, whether we want it there or not.
Totally. That comes from willies and bums. Essentially, you were brought up in England. Why aren't you involved with Porcupine Tree?
Well, I can't really give you a definitive answer, because it was all presented to me as a sort of done thing.
A fait accompli.
Pretty much, yeah. So I didn't get involved in any discussion. I didn't know they were making a record, and they made the record and then said to me, we want to use the name. So that's the end of that, really.
Right, to which you said, hey, no problems, guys.
Well, there wasn't really much I could say, because it is what it is, So they had decided to do it as a three-piece. So, I'm not going to say, well, what about me? Because obviously I was informed there was no role for me, pretty much.
You've got the tuba out.
So, well, what can you say? There's sort of nowhere to go from there. It sort of was like, we need to discuss this with you, but it was clear there was no discussion. There was no discussion to be had. It was already something they decided on. So, what am I going to do? Turn up with a trombone and try and make it? I don't know.
Trying to bring a bit of Oliver Nelson to it. I don't think there's any problems with that at all. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel probably that it would have been good to have been informed. It would have been good to have had a bit of input, even a phone call, possibly. But anyway, that's not the way they operate. So.
Leave after me. Did your dreams go as I fall? Tell me not to sleep. Watch me as I bleed. The summer breeze will scream. Save me now, or let me disappear. Let me disappear. Let me disappear. Could you not live a lie? Get out now while you're still alive. Walk out, watch out. Watch out, walk out. Did your dreams go as I fall? Tell me not to sleep. Watch me as I bleed. The summer breeze will scream. Save me now, or let me disappear. Dreams get old. Are my chances blown? Did your dreams get old as I fall? Tell me not to sleep. Watch me as I bleed. I follow where you lead. Let me disappear. Watch me as I bleed. The summer breeze will scream. Let me disappear. Watch me as I bleed. Tell me not to sleep. Shut up. Let me disappear.
O.R.k. You heard snippets of As I Leave just then. Someone Waits before that. And Don't Call Me a Joke at the beginning of that section. My thanks, as ever, to Colin Edwin for his time and good vibes. Now, have you been enjoying Jonathan Hultén's Forest sessions? Songs from his album Chants from Another Place are performed on plein air on YouTube. The Forest sessions now coming out as a CD and DVD. This from that is And the Pillars Tremble.
I will bear to say goodbye with open arms and smile. pillars of reality crumble.
Jonathan Hultén and The Pillars Tremble. GAZPACHO, March of Ghosts, joins Missa Atropos, When Earth Lets Go and Bravo in their Half-Speed Masters LP reissue series. We're going to have a deep dive into those in the next Kscope podcast, and also a long chat with Thomas Anderson from the band, where we find out what exactly a half-speed master is, and also his thoughts on AI making music and writing books. Really interesting conversation about the future of art coming up in the next Kscope podcast with Thomas. During the meanwhilest then, here's a little bit of Hell Freezes Over.
Look closer, look deeper. You've fallen so fast, and the starlit cold morning, where the dreams never end. You are wanting, and you wonder, seeing the shadows and the fiends. You've been stuck in this moment ever since you touched it. Come see. And here now, no railing is a piece of the same. So go on your way now, but know you're not alone. Dark sails cruise through these waters in the pond of memory.
Oh, the lovely sound of GAZPACHO. That's Hell Freezes Over. Right, some live news for you. Paul Draper is touring Manson's 6th album for its 25th anniversary in March. Being a Girl is on YouTube now, which was filmed at the Brixton Academy 24 years ago, capturing the band at their peak. There's a concert film, of course, available exclusively in the Closed for Business Manson box set. John Gom is on tour throughout November and December. Gong and Ozric Tentacles double headliner tour November and December. And O.R.k have announced a European tour starting in April. That involves a London date at the Indigo O2 Right, thanks for your company. Thanks for supporting the Kscope podcast and independent music. Like and share wherever you find your podcasts. Do please tell your chums. Right, I'm going to finish with the return of KLONE, the French expansive, emotional, emotive, atmospheric rockers. This is the new single. There's a video on YouTube, Within Reach. Speak to you soon. Ta-da.